Hi, welcome to the Creative Life Podcast. I am Caroline and I am your host. Today on the pod, we've got Brinn Daniels. Brinn is a filmmaker and a professor of cinema arts, but she is also a stand-up comedian. I met Brinn in college, I believe in the year 1999. That sounds right. And she's not only one of the most creative people that I know, she's definitely one of the funniest. If I could say the hardest times I've laughed in my life, it's most likely been with Brinn Daniels. So I'm really excited that she's here today on the pod, and I know you'll enjoy hearing from her as much as I enjoy talking to her. So here we go. Here's Brinn. Could you tell me a little bit about your story of how you got into your profession? Like what was your path?
Yeah. So, like a lot of people, I was a theater kid growing up. I came from a very sciencey family though. So I was kind of the first weirdo to be really into theater. But that was, in the 90s, that was kind of the only creative outlet at school other than choir, which I also did. So yeah, I did theater. I did ballet. I did tap dance when I was little, just kind of anything that I could do that was creative. I sang at my church. Really got excited about theater though. Like the theater bug bit me pretty hard in high school and had the dream of going to New York City. I can remember when Comedy Central became a channel. So stand-up comedy was always something that I was really into, but never really thought I would do. It was very terrifying to me as a younger person. So got into continued theater in New York City. That was, it was really fun, but I kind of realized that it wasn't as creative, just relying on other people's stories. So I eventually moved over into the film department from the theater department at school. And I found that to be a bit more rewarding. I wasn't relying on getting an audition or someone else's, approval of me to be in their project. I was able to kind of do my own projects. So I found that very rewarding. But I kind of breezed through school pretty quickly without learning as much as I should have. So I ended up going to graduate school in California, also for film. And then I freelanced. And then, and then I moved out on my own. Now, the nice thing about having the graduate degree that I had was then I was able to teach. Because in certain, I know that you know this, but certain academics, you have to have a doctorate. But in a creative field, a lot of times you only have to have a master's because that is the terminal degree. So once I became a mom, it was kind of a no-brainer. Like, let me move into academics, the academic side of things, and teach other people, which I found that I really love, and be able to be home and with my family a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about when you transitioned to teaching. Had you done much teaching before you got into higher ed? Had you done that in any way, as part of your grad degree? Had you done any teaching as a grad student, or was this totally new when you started teaching?
I had no I had no academic, expertise when it came to teaching. So rubrics, all of these things I had to learn on the job. I did teach, quote unquote, at after school programs, and at my church and more in creative capacities. So I had been more of a mentor before. And I also taught at a film school. I was like an assistant to the professor, like a training assistant. So I had done little bits like that, but I didn't know the ins and outs and a lot of the things that, honestly, that professors from other walks would know. So I came into it as a practical, practitioner.
I think that's true for a lot of arts fields. There are a lot of musicians that say get a doctorate in performance and then they become a professor, but they actually didn't teach because they were studying performance. It's right. Not dissimilar. But then that's a creative thing in a way too. You're learning how to explain the thing that you do in a grown-up way. So tell me a little bit about what you notice about students that come into your class, new students that have no experience with filmmaking at all.
They're all different. I mean, they're just, I mean, like people are and like kids are, but they're all different. And some come and they have had an amazing film program at their high school. And then some come and they've never touched a professional camera. Some come and they know exactly what they want to do and they stick with it for the 4 years. And then some come and they're like, I don't know. I'm just going to try a bunch of stuff. And those are kind of my favorite. I love the ones that I see in class who maybe haven't heard of a film that that I'm recommending, and then they go home and watch it, and I'll get that email like, oh my gosh, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind was brilliant. You were so right. And, and here's why. I love to see that like fire in their eyes, because it's so easy to get jaded in any creative profession.
Yeah.
You're trying so hard to get booked, and you've done the same thing and you're hoofing it for so many years, and the days can be grueling and long and not very rewarding sometimes. Sometimes it's very rewarding, but sometimes it's not. And so no matter what, like having a couple of kids at least every semester who are like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, or oh my gosh, that's so cool, or I watched this movie that you recommended and blah, blah, blah. And then you kind of I get to be reinvigorated, every now and then, which is also just very healthy for my, mental health as of any person. But as a creative too, it's nice to have that kind of see that spark in someone else's eye.
Do you feel like you can spot the ones that are going to be really creative, like the ones who are going to come in with like fabulous ideas? Is there something that are you surprised about the ones that have got the great ideas, or do you kind of see it coming?
Sometimes I'm surprised. I mean, I feel like and I think I'm more surprised because I teach different things. And so if I have a kid in editing who that's not their thing, but that's all I see them for a year, then I might be surprised when I kind of read their screenplay, because I don't teach that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. But so if it's in my, exact discipline, like I have this one student right now. I mean, I knew with her right away. But I knew, I think because she had the drive, she came in as a freshman and was like, I want to do camera and I'm going to work on everything. And then I got to know her as a person. And I think part of what sets her apart so much as an artist in particular, she had a very different upbringing. Her parents didn't allow her to watch a whole lot of television. They didn't have a lot of media. And so she really had to use her imagination. And as a parent, I'm kind of like, man, I think I could have done a better job of, finding ways like that to instill that creativity. And as a result, I mean, she has a very distinctive voice. And she is probably, she's one of the most creative students that I've ever had. And I'm sure she wasn't happy with her parents when she was younger. I mean, I can imagine. But she had some learning things that she overcame, but it just all has turned her into the most amazing artist. She really is unique.
That's fascinating. That I like it's because now there's so much talk, and of course I'm a parent, you're a parent. There's all this talk now about the effects of screens and the effects of social media and the effects of, we have this generation of kids who is now grown up with a phone in their hand and how this is affecting them. And so from your perspective, maybe there's something we don't know yet about the creative potential for children who are not so heavily influenced from a young age by this thing.
Yeah, I mean, right? I know that that's incredibly anecdotal. But it is so because she's rare. There aren't a lot of, and I have other, very creative students. But I can see very clearly how that with her, probably.
Also interesting that she's chosen a creative field that is screen-based, that's camera-based. Right, after that's interesting. I'd love to talk to her. That'd be interesting.
Yeah. She's great. But she also does, she does photography, and she actually just had an art show for her photography. And I think she had some paintings there as well. Oh, I know, it was mixed media.
So so it's the same thing. Like her creative juice is going in a lot of different directions.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what about the ones who just are not that creative? I mean, like, you certainly don't name names, of course, but like, I'm thinking like you students who are just kind of like
maybe they're doing their assignments and they're doing what's asked of them, but they're not necessarily thinking outside of the box. What characteristics do you
And
see
if
there?
they work hard, but they enjoy it, like
Yeah,
they
yeah.
enjoy films, they enjoy this or that, and they enjoy being a part of it. So a lot of students who, I can think of a couple who have gone into being, assistant directors, or even, editors are creative, but it's different. It is very skill based. And so there is some work that is very kind of rote when it comes to editing, and you do get a feel for it as much as it is also creative. So I've actually seen some good editors come out of it, but definitely some assistant directors and producers who are creative. Yeah, but they're more, problem solving creative, which is it's still creative in a way, but they're not, necessarily the ones putting hand to brush.
Right. Right. Well, maybe they find their own niche, and that's part of the learning is it's kind of like figuring out okay, I am big C creative, if you will. And this is pulling me in this way. I'm getting good feedback about this kind of part of my life. And others are maybe like, I'm getting better feedback that I'm more of a small C creative, if you will. And there's nothing wrong with that. I certainly don't want to make it sound as if
both.
I think there's something. No, there's nothing. It serves a solid purpose. The art form wouldn't exist without that. So do you think it's a question of, do you see anything that's common with any of these students that's like something about an experience they had prior to coming to you? Like, is it the ones who say had a high school film program? Are they markedly different than the ones who did not?
Not by junior year. They'll come in freshman year and, they'll know the tools better. But, I'll also have freshmen that just get in there. It really is just, I think, about how bold you are. That's a lot of it, is like the students that come in and they're just like, hey, can I be on your set? Hey, can I work on this project with you? Are the ones that end up being more successful over their time. So there is, the drive, it's almost more important probably than the creativity in a way. Because there are some very creative students that just cannot finish a project. And that's really sad as a professor too, because you're like, you could be so, successful.
But I think that's true for a lot of artists. I'm that way, I feel like, where it's like it goes so many different ways. I never seem to finish anything, but I'm not necessarily trying to finish anything. Sort of like, just whatever, like I'm fiddling with things, but when the goal is to finish, it's trickier.
Mm-hmm. And I do think hardship plays a part in it. And I see this in filmmaking. I see this with stand-up comedians. I think you don't have as much to say unless you have overcome something. And of course, there are exceptions to that rule. But I think by and large, the students who I see leave and I'm like, wow, they're going to do something, have been through something hard and or have just had a very different, a different life than a lot of other students that makes their voice very unique. Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you think they realize that? It's hard for young.
Know.
They're so young. It's like, college is.
I can think of one in particular who's graduating this year that I really want to have that conversation with. Because I walked with them as they went through some tough stuff at home. And I am but they're young and I don't want to, they're doing their thing and I don't want to, like, have you ever thought about how this actually maybe made your art better? But I think maybe, as we transition from teacher to friend and as, they transition into adulthood, I could have that conversation.
Sure. Or they may come to you to have that conversation too. Because we realize things about ourselves now that I didn't realize at the time. Certainly not at the time. Tell me about your stand-up a little bit, because I know it's sort of like you're in the, what seems to me to be sort of the beginning of it, of like, you're still building who you are as an artist in that way, but also the business side of it too, like getting out there more. So will you tell me a little bit about like the comedy part of it, just like the pure making jokes part of it? Like, what is that process like for you?
Because I've always loved stand-up. I have I remember when Comedy Central became a channel. It was 1996, and I remember just like being glued to it, but always being terrified of it, always being drawn to people who said they did it, memorizing, stand-up comedy, but never like, oh, I'll never do that. I need to hide behind a character or someone else's song or, the camera or whatever. But there's something about getting older, where you're just like, I don't care anymore and life is short and I've always wanted to do this and I'm just going to do it.
Was that the impulse to start? Just like, just sort of clicked with you, like, I'm just going to do it?
Yeah. I just was like, why do I know that deep down, I always wanted to do this. And so, I mean, I don't remember how old I was, 38, what would have been 37 maybe, when I was like, yeah, why not? I'm just going to do it. So there was a place in town, really awesome theater in town here in Nashville that is very supportive of artists, Third Coast Comedy Club, love them. And they offer a stand-up comedy class. And being an academic, I was like, well, if I take a class, then I'll feel like I can actually do this thing. And at the end of it, you have a 5-minute set and you get to perform it on their stage. And so you get to kind of, in a very safe environment, go, okay, is this something that I could do? And I loved it. And I felt like, I was one of the better, to me, I was like, I think I did pretty well in this class and I want to do it. Now that was end of 2019. So COVID hit 2020 and everywhere was closed for a time. And then once they opened back up again, I mean, you had to be a name, to get
They're trying to draw people in, of course. Yeah.
Right. I mean, people like Dave Chappelle were doing backyard shows. I mean, it was, it was tough. But I loved it. And I had, because of the class and other things with the film community, I had some friends. So I just kind of stuck at it. It was just a slower process because of COVID. But in a way, I think that was good. Because I got to have a little bit more time writing and developing my voice. And because it does take a long time. Like you can write jokes till you're blue in the face, but if you're not saying them over and over again, you don't really know what your comedic voice is. And I'm still, I think I'm still in some ways finding it, but I've gotten a lot closer over the 4 years.
Now, when you first started, like how long did it take you to say, like, go from writing a joke to say getting it to, yeah, that's a good joke?
Oh, well, when you first start, you think you're good. When you first start, you're like, this is hilarious because I think it's hilarious. And then you go to an open mic and nobody laughs. And you still kind of go, well, all right, maybe it's not that funny, but it's probably funny. And then just through repetition and just watching what different reactions you go, okay, I think there is something to this. Maybe it's not there yet. Maybe I can tweak some words. And then it also is state of mind. Like I did a 25-minute spot last night.
25 is long. It's
the longest one I've done. But I had been, again, because of COVID, I had written so much that I haven't gotten a chance to say, or I have, but then I'll put them away because you always want to go with your strongest stuff. And I had, what was the joke? Oh, I had a joke that I did at my very first class, like that class I was telling you about where I did a stand-up class at my very first 5-minute stand-up ever. And it was all right. It got a laugh. But I just knew it could be better. And I just never put it away because some of them you just can't. You're like, I don't know what's wrong with it right now. I'm just going to put it away. And I came back to it this week and was like, oh, I know what's missing, right? It was a joke about my husband. And how when I first met him, he was really good looking and he treated me well and how that's very suspicious to a woman who's dating. And then I go on to say, if he's not drowning and burying his feelings so deep no one can find them, then he must be doing that to cats and ex-girlfriends. But it was cute, but it was an easier connection. I just added a bit about that's what every crime doc or that's what every woman said about Jeffrey Dahmer. And, or whatever. Right. And so just adding that little connective tissue piece, it went over better, than it ever had. But there are sometimes you have to put things away or something will happen in your life and it's very present and I'll write a joke about it. And it's just, it's going better than the stuff I'm more comfortable with because it's like right there. And so that happens too. So I have some jokes that were newer that I started doing right after something happened to me in September, and they've just always gone well because I felt it very deeply,
Yeah. Well, it's also like now it's like hours logged. Now you're getting better at this. So I imagine that it's your feedback loop is faster. Like your ability to take something from start to ready is considerably faster and cleaner.
Yes, and that's what every comic says, is that you just get better and better at like figuring out what you think you need to do to a joke to make it funny. And I'm definitely not at the point where I'm batting 100 or anything. But when something is missing, I either, I can figure it out, or I just put it away until I can.
Oh, yeah. But I think what you're describing is that's feedback. That's like what like good teaching is. Like good teaching is good feedback, right? And so you're getting it from the audience, but you're also giving it to yourself based on that. And it goes back to like how adept you are at taking feedback. Because this is something that I think, people really struggle with. This is like the not letting it become like an ego bruise or something, like a piece of feedback, positive, like a piece of something that feels negative.
Yeah, because you have to have that confidence in order to even get up there. So It is really hard to then have the humility of like, okay, that could be better. And I see that a lot, and particularly with young, new comics, they're like, well, I know this is funny, and I'm not going to change a word of it. And, maybe it might be funny, but maybe it could be funnier. And I think in life, that's a good kind of goal. There's a trainer that I work with at the gym, and whenever you ask him how he is, he says, best I'll ever be. No, sorry. Worst I've ever. I'm going to get this wrong. I'm going to start this over.
Okay.
Let me think about it first.
Okay. Because it's going to be good.
Got it. Okay. There's this trainer at the gym, and he has this quote that I love. Whenever you say like, hey, Nick, how are you today? He says, best I've ever been, worst I'll ever be. And I love that, because the idea is that you can always improve, but more than that like he's determined that he will always improve.
Uh-huh. And there's that belief that you're capable of improving.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that's the key. That's a big motivating factor. There is some data that in arts teaching that students, kids, adults, everybody, the ones who tend to be like over time successful or over time are the ones who over time stick with it. Really. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a lot of it's hours logged, but that if you look back at their experiences, the ones who tend to stick with it and therefore become really great, most often had really positive early experiences. Something that happened early on in their path that made them think, hey, I could maybe do this. That went well. Like that feeling of positivity. And then in some ways it's like we chase that feeling of that intermittent positive feedback that we don't expect to come in any time, right? I mean, that's a real like human animal response to learning, is like we want that positive feedback. We don't expect to come to us, but it's the ones who got it.
It's more powerful even than the consistent positive feedback.
For sure. Like, consistent feedback is actually a deterrent to growth and a deterrent to learning. Inconsistent, unexpected, intermittent feedback is way more of a driver for learning. And like you were saying that the first time you went up at this first open mic, you felt like, hey, that wasn't half bad. Right. And that experience, had you bombed that first time out,
I might have said, maybe I should put this down. Yeah.
Statistics would say you would have been less likely to continue. Maybe you would have given another couple of shots, but it probably would have petered. But it's like you get a little taste of something, and then it's sort of like you're trying to chase back that taste. I think about that a lot, like because I work with very young children, like really young children. And so it's like this idea of what are you, how are you setting them up so that they're going to have some really positive, formative experiences, but they need to be truthful. They need to be authentic. You don't get the same effect by me saying to them, oh, that was just fantastic, when it wasn't, because they know it wasn't fantastic. And then they feel like that I'm not honest with them. And then that's even worse, right? But actually setting up a situation where they're going to have a really positive experience in a formative way is going to actually probably make a bigger impact in their ability to continue.
Yeah, I agree. I teach freshmen in an editing class, and all the projects are hard for some students, but the first really, really hard project, I have them edit a music video, and it's usually like a really tough puzzle piece, and they're on it for a month. I break it up, I stretch it out by a month, so that they can get better and better. But by the end of it, everybody's sick of the song, and they have worked so hard, and some of them have decided during this project, I don't ever want to be an editor. Like, this is when it happens. But because they work so hard, and I know it's kind of grueling and not very rewarding, it's like a contest, and I have 3 winners, like the top 3 edits. And I remember the first time that I did that, there was a student who, I don't know if they got recognized a lot for a lot of things. And they genuinely won. And this was in a case where it was a music video for an artist who picked the winners. And she won. And you could just see it in her, she was shy. And you could just see in her face, like, how proud she was.
Right.
And then she was like that, the next semester, she was like, I'm an editor.
Right. So it clicks in your mind. You identify yourself by that feeling.
Yeah.
And now, brain is wild, dude. Like that.
The reward system.
Right. Like I think so back on, like, am I a musician? Did I become a singer in whatever capacity that I am in these days? But like, did I go down the path of that because I was told when I was 5 that I had a pretty singing voice and I was given a solo?
Right.
It's fine. Right. Like those early things of just being like, oh, I'm good. And then you identify yourself like, I'm a singer. I'm a person who sings well. Okay, then I should do that thing. We all want to do the thing we're good at.
Right. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. So, okay, tell me a little more about stand-up, because I think the stand-up is such a fascinating thing. It's so immediate. It's so fast. It's so raw.
It's an involuntary reaction. Mm-hmm. Like if something's funny, people will laugh. And if it's not, they won't.
It's a communal thing. It's very much about the energy of the audience and who that audience is.
Right.
And if you don't read that energy correctly, it can go way off the rails. I can imagine.
I can't do the same jokes in rural Tennessee that I can like in downtown Nashville. They just don't play the same. Or I can, but I know to kind of twist it a little bit differently.
You know the energies, the vibe's going to be different.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can you feel that? Like when you first go, now you know it because you know these audiences in some ways, but like, could you feel a different energy coming at you these first few times you played at different places?
You do sort of stereotype people and go from there. You look at a crowd and you go, okay, I'm in the middle of nowhere and, people are dressed like this, and I feel pretty good that if I make fun of vegans for 10 minutes that nobody's going to be offended, But that being said, I love going into the rooms in downtown Nashville and making fun of vegans. Yeah. It's just different.
The vegans like to be made fun of too. It's like
they do. And the people that are with the vegans really like when you make fun of the vegans. I've found.
I use that quote right there on
there you go. It's a good one.
Yeah. It's really good. So tell me a little bit about fear. Do you have any fear?
Yes, but not like not like I used to. I used to, even if it was something I knew I was good at, I would still get really nervous if I got up, and I used to sing as well. But I had heard people tell me I was good at singing. And so I would still get nervous, when I was younger, but I don't know. I should have been more nervous last night than I was, doing more time than I had done. Like I knew I had the jokes, but it's like, oh, this is only my second feature spot ever. And this is for a new client, like we'll see, but I have practiced enough and I had more shows this month, and there is that click, right? When you feel something click. I was at my first feature spot last weekend, It was 18 minutes. And the first time that I'd ever like had enough time where I kind of like went out of order, like I have an order in which I like to go, and I kind of missed something and was able to come back to it without it really messing me up. And so I came off of that set and I was like, okay, that was, I can't say that I killed. It was kind of like a smaller crowd in a big room, but they laughed, and I didn't get tripped up trying to come back around to a joke. Whereas, a year ago, if I would have missed something, I would have like deer in the headlights and like looked down at my notes and like tried to, go back. And now it's just like, oh, well, I'll just move that chunk over here and I'll come back this way. And, and I think that's just from the more that you do it. And then I don't know, I say it all the time, but I do feel like getting older for me has been a lot of it. Because a lot of people say this, but it is true. Like the older I get, the less I care what other people think. And so
you're not the first person to say that on this podcast.
Right.
It's like it is a universal
so
feeling.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, every year I just get, and that doesn't mean that you still have to have nerves. You want to do a good job, but there's not that intense fear of like, what if everybody hates me? I don't care. Who are these people? I have my family at home that loves me, and you're a better artist, I think, when you have a fuller life. And so it is this weird thing of like this intense focus on something that you want to be good at. Mm-hmm. But you do have to have moments of like stepping away from it and doing real things in the real world that you can pull from. I mean, comics talk about this all the time of like, they get on the road and they're on the road for a year, and then they don't have any jokes that are relatable to an audience anymore because they've just been in hotels for a year and on a bus or, whatever. And you can only do so many airport and hotel jokes. I mean, not, you know what I mean? And so then they just have to take a break, and they have to touch grass and kind of reframe and have a life again so that they can reinvigorate their art.
Where do your jokes come to you? Do they come to you like what's like joke writing look like for you?
I have a notes app on my phone, and I will be driving and I'll, hey Siri, make a note. So a lot of them, I do a lot of driving these days because my kids are all in activities all over town. So that's where a lot of it is right now. And then I have mine organized on my computer. Typing's just faster for me than writing. I will write them out if I'm trying to memorize, or at least I did, earlier on, and I'll have them by category, and I'll have like my good ones up top, and they're like highlighted in green because I can use these anytime. The ones that I need to come back to and work on are in yellow. And then if they're red, they just, highlighters are everything. I'm a teacher. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's a system that works for you. I mean, it's like,
yeah. So I can kind of find things. And like I said, it worked out this week because I had, I need to add 5 minutes to a set, 6 minutes to a set. Well, you know what? I think I do know how to fix this one and just pull, do
you try to write
Florida chunk?
Do you try to write like at a set time every day? Or I know your schedule's kind of wild, but like, do you try to set aside time? Do you set aside time every day, or is it more just kind of like when you have the time?
Our schedules have been all over the place lately. So we used to, Alex and my husband and I would write together every other Saturday or Sunday, depending on sports and activities. Now we don't really have that time to ourselves because we're back in softball and, church and like all of those things. So now it's kind of whenever I have a spare moment, whenever I've gotten through all my grading and the kids aren't at softball or, gymnastics or taekwondo or any of the drum lessons or any of those things. So it is pretty sporadic now, but I am looking forward. I mean, that's the other thing I love about being a teacher is that I will have the summer off because I'm not going to be teaching a summer class. And so that is my plan, is to have a regimented time, for this. And then
great.
A time.
Think of how much you can get done when you have more.
I know. I am really looking for, I love writing.
Are you going to try to do little shows in the summer?
I'm actually going to start producing my first show this
summer. I saw that on your Instagram.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. So as a film, professor of filmmaker and a comedian, I just see this clear lack of good tapes for like comedians that are good. And you have to have that if you're going to go on to the next bigger thing. So I wanted to be able to provide great, video and audio services to comedians who I know that I believe could really make it if they just had a strong tape.
And people would be comfortable with you because they also know you as a comic and they know that you understand what they're doing. And
right. And I know what it needs to look like. And and how long it needs to be depending on where they want to submit. But we're calling it dry run so that, they can kind of get a dry run of like what an actual show would look like. And that way the clubs can see, oh, they can do this and I can get a professional performance out of it.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited.
It's really cool. Yeah. But this is like, I don't know, this is a very bold new thing. This is maybe the most creative thing that you've put together yet, because it's taking all these aspects of your life and like putting them into one with a goal at the end of it too.
Right.
It's not just sort of like, there's a purpose to what you're doing.
Right. And I guess I have a little bit more fear about that project than others, because I don't know, like it's really important to me right now, So I am like, I'm nervous about it, but I'm nervous because I really want it to go well, but that hopefully means that it will.
Are you doing any other like filmmaking stuff now? I mean, I know you're teaching, but are you doing any independent work?
I haven't done a ton. I've, done some graphic design for comedy stuff for some of my comedy friends, just for fun, because that's kind of another new creative skill that I'm working on. I really like it. It's fun. I mean, like you said, when you're creative, you just are like, I'm antsy. I want to try this now. And I want to try my hand at that. So I love music videos are my favorite thing. And luckily at my school, there are a lot of really amazing musicians and music teachers, music professors. So I have the opportunity every year to kind of make a nice music video with students, for students, or for other professors. So we were just finishing up one for one of the professors has a band, and all of a Christian band, and all the students, we worked on it. We shot it in my house, and they were in it. And the students got kind of a more real world, shooting experience. And then I worked with an editor, like a student who was one of those who sat in editing class and was just like, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could do that. That's so cool. And then asked if she could work on something extra. And so I mean, I do things kind of adjacent to school. And that, I don't know, I like that right now. I mean, I might someday kind of wish that I were doing more outside stuff, but it's nice to have that with the students and kind of help them get their careers off, because I don't see film sets are grueling, and I am getting older, and I don't really want to do the 16-hour days anymore. So
I hear that.
There is also that. And I'm sure that's played a part in my needing a different creative outlet.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's also a little bit like you have only a limited number of hours in the day. So like if you're gonna you're gonna do,
and I mean, if I'm filmmaking, I have to
and still be a wife, and still
I have to be away from my family. And if I'm writing comedy, I can kind of do it on the couch next to the kids while they're doing whatever.
Do you think? And I don't have to air this. I'm just kind of interested. Do you think you could write yourself a sitcom?
No, you know what I would do is I am writing sketches. So I have written a sketch that I am talking to one of my friends who's a director, and then also I just found out that one of my students wants to in life be a sketch comedy director. And I was like, I have a sketch that I really wanted to film. It's like about the election, and so I am going to film that. I am going to do that. So just like, but I like the shorter. Like I want to do something and then put it away.
Yeah, like writing and directing a feature is not like on your list of things to be doing right now.
No, and it never has been. I mean, I wrote one feature back in college.
So tell me a little bit about like, what do you do if you have like real off time? Like, and you're going to do something totally different. What would you do? What would you choose to do to fill your off time?
I do end up like just wanting to sit and write for at least a couple hours of it. Yeah.
So it's pulling you a little bit. Like that's kind of pulling you in that.
Yeah. Lately that has been it, because I have had so little downtime. and I want to be writing, that is what I tend to do. It's like write sketches or write comedy. And sometimes I just want to like, or this is more, it's either that or I just like want to take a nice long walk in the neighborhood and just clear my head. Because the other thing as a creative is like, you're always trying to sell yourself, and I have to be on social media so much more than I want to be.
Oh, tell me
So
about that a
much
little
more.
bit. Tell me about the commerce side of it.
Yeah. And I mean, you have to, if you want to get booked, you have to, and I don't even play the game really well, but I try to like take pictures of everybody if I'm on a show with them, and then I post them for them so that they can repost. And, nobody has a picture of themselves on stage because they're on stage,
Right,
they can't
right.
do both things. So I'll do that. Or, with this show that I'm producing, I want to post about it periodically. And comics, apparently nowadays, everything happens on instant messenger or, Instagram messenger, either one. Like, it's very rare for me to get a text or a phone call. It'll be like a group message on Instagram for this particular show, and the show materials will be in there so you can just repost them. So, I mean, I had to make myself more available on Facebook specific, and I was so hoping to get off Facebook. I don't mind Instagram. I know they're owned by the same company. I don't know why I don't like Facebook, but I was just really wanting to get off it, and then had to be on it because for some bookers, that's how they work.
This is how they're conducting the business via Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
It must feel like an antiquated platform. Like, I'm surprised that they wouldn't have like.
Yeah, it does. But that's where some of the bookers are more comfortable on that than they are on Instagram. And I'm very happy that I haven't had to have a TikTok yet, but I know that's going to come, if I really, because that's been kind of a way for people to get more viral and get more views more quickly. But two is enough. I have enough of a time suck on all of that. But yeah, a lot of business and a lot of booking is done through instant messenger and Instagram. And, like I said, not my phone, which is interesting.
And it's just putting yourself out there as much as, I mean, what do you think there's like
you have to post. Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, yes, I'm sure there is. I'm sure that I need to post way more often than I do. But yeah, you have to post about shows every single time you're on them. You have to repost other things if you're not on, because if somebody thinks that you're not working, then they don't want you on their show.
Oh, sure. It's keeping your name out there, keeping people
right.
seeing your name in different ways.
Right. And there's also something to producing a show. It seems to me that like with comedy, if you produce a show, you get on more shows because people want you to book them on your show.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so it's very reciprocal, which I completely understand, but not maybe what I thought.
Do you feel like that reminds me, do you feel like being around other comics is making you more funny or less funny?
Yes. Yeah. I definitely think it is making me more funny, because even just when you're hanging out backstage, people are cracking jokes. Like nobody turns it off. You're trying to make people laugh. Yeah. It feels great when you make somebody funny laugh. I was sitting next to a comic that I admire last night, and I said something. I was trying to make him laugh, just low key, trying to make him laugh all night. And when I said something that he leaned his head back and started laughing, I was like, oh, that felt so good, and just we're all doing that all the time. Yeah. So I definitely think it sharpens you to be around really good.
What about filmmakers?
You also, yes, absolutely. Because it gives you that like thing to reach for. Like, oh, I mean, if I was always around people that were not as good as me, then I'd probably feel like I'm doing pretty good. Like, I don't really need to work harder, But if I see somebody that are at the top of their game, if I see somebody like getting all the laughs, then I'm like, I want that. All right. I better like keep my energy up, and I'm going to go home and write, more. And I don't know. Yeah, I definitely think that it helps to be around other creative people and people that you can look up to. And it's important not to be, I mean, even just like personally, you can't really get involved in the toxicity. There are a lot of toxic people in everywhere, but in every creative profession particularly. And I mean, you just can't let yourself get sucked down by it.
Why do you think people are come with that energy? Because I've felt that way too. Like it's like it just feels
Yeah.
like, yeah, why are you so negative here? We're
I
singing
think,
songs and playing piano. Why are you being negative here?
yeah,
Like,
because
yeah,
it feels like there are limited spots, and like to some extent there are. But I just really feel like if there's a lot of good art in a community, then that community becomes known for that, and then the tide rises for all the boats. And people want different stuff. Like what's funny to me is what's hilarious to me might just be funny to you, or what's funny to me you might be like meh. Everybody's so different. There's room for everybody's voice, you know. So yeah, I don't know, and I don't want to be a part of it. It's less important to me to be famous than it is to like just really enjoy life in general and enjoy the process of comedy and all of that. And the other thing that can drag you down is like not having supportive people in your life in general. Like, you don't have to hang out after the show. It honestly helps your career if you do a lot of the time. But as a parent, I'm probably not. I mean, I'm not going out drinking with people after the show.
right,
That's just not what I'm going to be doing.
that time of life is done. Yeah,
Yeah. But even just in your regular life, if you have somebody really toxic who they're going to pull you away from the things that you love, and that's not good for your art or your life.
yeah. Well, you said at the very beginning of this, you said that your parents were not artists, but you grew up doing a lot of these things. So what was what were they like about all of these pursuits that you were doing as a kid?
They were great. They were very supportive right from the beginning. Like, I don't know what this is, but I don't know if my parents, I think I found a lot of it, but I did, I know I had an uncle who was like, all right, well, you're into weird stuff like this. Like, do you want to come to New York with me? Or, hey, my best friend's doing a play and I'll get you an audition and stuff like that. And my parents it just was a different world. But yeah, if I was like, hey, I heard about this dance, studio. This is the one that's the good one. And I want to go there. Yeah, let's go. And they would pack me up and they would take me and my mom. I mean, that's all she did for years was just drive my brother to baseball and me to dance and softball and theater. And yeah, I mean, it was difficult, but they were very supportive. They always made room for it.
Right. And there's some privilege with that too, like having parents
Absolutely.
that were able to give you.
Yeah,
those
my mom
experiences.
didn't work 2 jobs and my parents were married. That's very, very different situation than a lot of people are in. I was very lucky. Yeah. And I had a theater, I didn't even know that there were so many schools that didn't have theater departments. I have a good friend here who's a comedian, and she said that at her high school, they did not even have, like, there were no plays. They didn't do any of that, that there were so many schools that didn't have that. So even that was very lucky.
Yeah, there's a lot of just disproportionate opportunity for experience to even try something for so many kids. Like, if you don't have family who's able to drive you places, or you live in a place that doesn't have many opportunities too. I mean, like, that's another thing.
That's a very real, we talk about food deserts, but there are definitely art deserts too.
Yeah, you're living in Nashville, which is a town where you were able to be a filmmaker, a professor of film, and a stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
There are not that many towns in the world where you could do all those things well. Do you think it's something that, like, when you're working with students, do you think it's something you can teach them, these impulses? Like, a way of, like, thinking creatively? Can you teach that? Or do you think it's more they have it or they don't?
I think sometimes you can. I think there are students that you can, like, because you try to come at it different ways, right, as a teacher. So, like, I have a lot of materials that focus on, like, I'm thinking of one, for example, that has an eye tracing experiment, and I show it in my editing class. And it's scientists have, like, taken this part of Blade Runner and, like, seen where people's eyes go at different points. And they did it for different movies. Why do cuts work? And then why does this cut that doesn't seem like it should work actually work? Mm-hmm. And so, like, talking about pattern disruptors, as well as, giving, like, you have rules that you give for film. And then there's always the student who's like, but I'm breaking it on purpose. And I go, okay, are you though? Like, why did you break it here? Because as freshmen, they almost never break it on purpose. They just say, oh, well, Star Wars did it or whatever. And you're like, yeah, but you're not George Lucas yet. So, it's actually not coming off that way or whatever. But I think a lot of it you can teach. I think it's like, to me, it's like basketball. Like there are kids that are built for it, that have a natural ability, but the ones that have a natural ability but don't work at it, and don't try to get better, then they will just kind of stay at that level. And then there are the students who maybe don't have as natural an ability, but they work really hard at it and they just by repetition get better and better. And then of course there are the students like the Kobe Bryants who are like had tons of natural ability. They were kind of built for it and they work really, really hard. And those are the ones that truly excel. But you have to have a little bit of both. You can get to a certain level with just one or the other. But I really do think it's more important wherever level you start at, natural ability or not as much, to obviously to work hard, but to be like we were talking about earlier, open to feedback. If you can admit that you could be better, that's the first step to getting better. And it's the students that don't admit that I think stay down here,
Yeah. Do you think you are somebody who was taught to think this way? Or do you think it's just who you are?
I think I have a very sciencey, analytical brain, especially for a creative person. So, yeah, I was raised by pharmacists, and so I kind of think that I don't have as creative a brain as a lot of other people. I just think that I love it so much that I've worked hard at it. I wouldn't say, I don't think that I'm one who is just like, I was always going to be like the next Steven Spielberg or anything like that. I just think that I just loved it and I was willing to work hard at it. Yeah. I think I'm that other side people. I really do.
Yeah. When in your learning, if you think back on like you were, I guess your film studies, like when you were learning all these things, or maybe acting or dance could be the same. When did you feel like you got to the point where you were thinking outside of the box, where you were actually making creative choices on your own? Like, can you clock that? Like how old you were or what point in your path that might have been?
I think the first time when I kind of thought that I was thinking outside of the box was at NYU after I had moved into film. And I think when I decided, I can tell you exactly when, actually. I was NYU is a very serious film school. You make documentaries or you make drama, like dramatic pieces. There's no room for comedy. There's no room for music videos. That is not serious art. And I had a teacher and we were supposed to make a documentary. And I was like, I want to make a mockumentary. And he was like, I really think you should make a documentary. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. Like, that's just not me, And at the risk of failing, I was like, this is me. This is my voice. This is what this is where I am going to be. Mm-hmm. And I remember showing the film in class and my serious doc teacher looked at me and went and just smiled and laughed. And I was like, I got him, So for me, it was that like comedic thing. And I had a similar moment on the other side at USC where I made a serious film for the first time. And it was very personal. And it was very like raw and personal and serious, which no one expected out of me because I never did that. And I remember my teacher said, Brinn, that was really insightful and personal. And thank you for that. And I think that's still like for me as a comedian, more on a comedy side, I was like, I tricked him, like, and so I think for me, it was like the coming together of both of those stories, right? Because one was like, I had this hardship and this like very personal hardship that weighed on me that I just was like so exhausted and I didn't have time to do a comedy like I wanted to, that I just out of exhaustion almost made this very personal film. And then with the other one, just convinced that I was going to fail the class, but like, I don't care. This is what I want to do, you know? And so now I try to almost just instinctively now, I'm like, I want to be funny, but I also want, you know, I want it to have meaning for me. And I don't know. I think those two things were moments that were important in forming that.
It sounds like you're saying that like in both instances, you kind of got over fear of the outcome.
Yes.
Like it was much more about the making of it than it was about the grade in this case, which is
yeah. No,
cool.
I think that's absolutely what it was.
You're a gutsy dame.
I'm going to put that on my stationery from now on.
Gutsy dame. That's it.
Brinn, thanks for being on the podcast today. And if anybody would like to know more about Brinn and what she does and her fantastic comedy, you can find her on brinndaniels.com on the old interwebs. I'm going to put that in the show notes as well. Thanks for being here today, everybody. And until next time, keep making stuff.